on the steepest sections where
just roll, right?
you're out of control.
Just roll.
You just
barrel roll
tuck and
it.
roll. What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Bing slouches. Number 10.
Yeah, 10. We're slouching. We're slouching
We're about
today.
ready to move off hands. We have to use toes. Fortunately, yours are exposed over there.
That's okay. I don't
Count these episode numbers.
I don't wear shoes if I don't have to.
So we're talking barefoot hill running technique today, correct?
Yeah, we're not talking barefoot. That's old news, right?
Well, you never know what's new and what's not anymore.
That's right.
Hill running technique today is on tap based on different distances. The importance of proper, or what we deem proper, hill running technique to make you more efficient, less injury prone, and able to handle the load that is put on the body during your races.
But first, shout-outs.
Shout-outs. Love the shout-outs.
Who we got?
We got some good ones. I'm going to kick it off with Hart Robinson. He's been a regular on the shout-outs.
And on the couch.
And on the couch. Yeah, he was a couch man.
Once again, got on the couch, won a race.
Improved performance. He went and did the race between the bridges, which was actually one of our shout-outs last week. And it was a mud fest to the point where it turned to concrete. I heard there was at least 22 broken derailleurs or jacked up chains and cassettes.
I feel like that's all I saw was broken bikes.
Crazy, but Hart kept his bike in working condition, and he was actually running gears. So it's not because he was rolling that single speed.
That is weird.
But yeah, he ended up getting the win, so that was a good result. What do you got, Dale?
Most of mine come from Augusta 70.3. We got Liz Hall, Michael Ort, and Mitzi Bolton all went down there and either PR'd or had a fantastic race. I guess Liz, in her case, it's her first 70.3, so it's a PR anyways. But she also finished top 20. She thinks she was 16th in her age group on her first go-around, so that's pretty solid. And then also our buddy Todd Perkins, who's a hopper. Mm-hmm. And he rolled a 4:38 in his first ever half.
Solid.
It's real solid.
Definitely.
But since we're talking hill running technique today, I figured I'd also give a shout out to Brian Williams and Sean Hillsden, the race directors of Big Hill Pond 25 and 50K, because those guys have put an amazing amount of work into this race, and there's only 35 spots left in a first year race. It's kind of crazy.
What are they capping it at?
I think 300.
Wow.
So if you are
the proceeds going to the state park, right?
Yeah, I believe they've basically, with the proceeds from the race, they've doubled the budget of the park.
Wow.
I think that's what I understood.
That's awesome.
So really awesome job. And so if you're even thinking about doing a trail race in October, I would highly recommend checking it out and signing up and get one of those last spots. There's a lot of gear that they're giving away. There's all kinds of stuff. They have some really awesome sponsors. Those guys have just.
I heard you won something.
I think I won a shirt.
Yeah.
Icebreaker shirt.
That's what I heard.
So
if you're looking for either training miles or to apply some of the training tips, technique tips we're talking about today.
Yep.
That would be a great event for you, or maybe a few people are actually targeting that. You and Jason Cruz?
Jason and I are going over
there. Anyone else?
There's a lot of people from the area, obviously, going over there. But
cool.
As far as our athletes.
Well, if anyone else is planning on attending, shout out to us and let us know.
Yeah. So the big question is hill running technique, and why the heck would you change it up, really? So what we're going to do is we're going to break it into basically a marathon and below, and then basically ultra distances. And so why would we do that? Basically, when you train for anything from like a mile up to a marathon, your training load, or even your longest single training day, is either going to be over the full distance of that event, or you're going to be doing up to like 85% of the distance in any one single training day. So there's a lot less concern for muscular fatigue, and we're really more concerned about
on race day.
Yeah, sorry. So we're more concerned about maximizing speed and efficiency. On the other hand, with an ultra, a lot of times your longest training day is only going to be like a max of like 75% of the distance or the time that you're going to be doing in the race on race day. And then in a lot of cases, like say you're like for 100, you're really only doing your biggest one day is half of,
for a lot of folks, a 50-mile race typically, right, is going to be their peak training volume for their build up to their 100-miler.
So
just because your body can't handle recovery from something so big.
That and the risk reward there is, it's just not there to send you out there for 60, 70, 80 miles when you're training for a 100-mile race. So the big thing that we have to worry about there is muscular fatigue, joint inflammation, those type of things that can really shut you down and force you to walk a lot more than you really wanted to. So if we can minimize fatigue with our running technique, then we're going to be way better off on those longer distances. So
how do we do that, Dale?
How do we do that?
That's the question.
We'll break it down from with uphill and downhill, and then we'll bounce back and forth between the distances. Because,
for an ordinary person, you'd think about hills, and most people think, going uphill is something that is so tough and challenging. But, for a lot of folks, if it's a long, extended downhill, that can really beat you up more than you'd think.
Yeah, so we won't really dive into the training for hills. That is a whole nother topic. We could get a whole nother episode on that. What we're talking about is just the technical aspects of going up and downhill. But, there are several races out there, and if you're an ultra runner, Western States is the, Super Bowl of ultra running. It's net downhill. I mean, so it is such a load on the quads and calves and impact to the joints. You have to physically prepare properly for that, and then employ a lot of these techniques while you're doing the race. So let's talk marathon shorter, going uphill. So we're looking at maximizing speed and efficiency. Number one thing I tell people to do is do not look up the hill. Don't look up the hill. If you look up the hill, it's going to start lifting your chest, and then your foot landing position is more likely to come out in front of your hips, which is going to put force in the wrong direction and slow you down. So don't look up the hill. We want to look basically into the hill, and the steeper that the hill gets, the more you're going to kind of look into the hill.
Yep. Yeah, because you want to maintain that neutral neck and chin position.
Yep. So
at no point in time are we wanting chin up or chin buried.
Keep the chin down, but spine neutral.
Yep.
So the second big thing is powering your legs with your arm movements.
And this one's huge. This is one that you can feel right away.
Absolutely.
When you actually start applying this. I guarantee anyone listening to this, if you go and actually think about powering your legs with your arms, you'll feel that almost power transfer increase.
Yeah, so as you drive back that right arm, that left leg, it's always opposite arm, opposite leg.
Yep.
As you drive back that right elbow, that left leg is also driving back, powering off the ground at the same time. And when you are going uphill, it's almost easier sometimes to think about driving that elbow back to get the proper cadence for uphill running. So that's kind of the third point, is make sure you're pushing back, driving your foot back down the hill.
Yeah.
You have to push backwards to go forward. You have to push down the hill to go up the hill. So always make sure that your focus is pushing backwards, really extending the leg, extending the hip, and pushing backwards. The last point on uphill is making sure that you kind of shorten or quicken your cadence a little bit. I don't want to say necessarily shorten your stride, But inevitably, when you speed your cadence up a little bit, the stride shortens a little bit, but we still have to think about pushing backwards. But that higher cadence run takes away some of that muscular load of having to push yourself up the hill. So a little bit higher cadence. It's no difference than power on a bike. You can go high force, low cadence, or low force, high cadence, and you're still producing the same power going the same speed. In this case, we want to go higher cadence, lower force going up the hill. So we can...
Each step, you're moving your body less distance up the hill, but by the fact that you're doing more steps, you are now lifting your body. So it's like if you ever have someone go and do a single leg step up, single leg step up on a 6-inch block, not too hard. Single leg step up on a 24-inch block or a 36, the more you're lengthening out, the more you're reaching out in front of you, the harder that becomes on the body. So those shorter steps, that's kind of the little analogy there.
So those are the big 4 for uphill running for the shorter, faster distances. Now that we talk about ultra, I want you to take those same points, all the same things apply. But now we're talking about we're running into sections that are so steep that we don't necessarily have a choice to run high cadence, because high cadence on a super steep hill basically gets you going nowhere.
Exactly.
So now we're talking about just it's worth hiking those sections. So uphill, we're hiking. On those, when you're hiking, you still want to take shorter strides, and we don't want to take, think of it like you're walking upstairs and you're trying to take 3 stairs instead of 1 stair at a time. When you take 3 stairs, that's a lot more muscular load, and over time, that's going to fatigue you sooner. So we want to take those shorter steps going up some of those sections that we have to hike. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is to kind of stay off your toes. And I say that because when you get up on your toes, you put a whole lot more load on your calves and your Achilles. And it also positions your foot to where your knee comes out in front of your toes. So that puts a lot more load on the knees, the lower legs, essentially knees, quads, and calves. Knees, calves, and Achilles. And those muscles those joints muscles they're the ones that fatigue a little bit sooner because they're smaller muscles. You think about the bigger muscles that are on the upper leg, those are a lot more fatigue resistant than the muscles that are in your calves and in your feet and all that stuff. So try to stay off your toes when you're hiking steeper sections.
And sometimes it's going to be a little bit unavoidable, depending on how steep the grade is, but just something to think about there. If you're constantly contracting that calf and now it's fighting against you the entire time as you're loading that body up, it can put a lot of stress through that connective tissue also.
Absolutely. All right, so we're transitioned back to the shorter distances, and now let's talk about downhill, because this is something that people don't really talk about a lot. And downhill, in a sense, you can gain a lot from properly running downhill, or you can beat yourself to death by improperly running downhill for too long. So when you're going downhill in the shorter distances, again, you want to keep your head neutral. We don't want to pin our chin to our chest, and we don't want to be looking up at the horizon either. So keep the head neutral. I usually say on a gradual downhill, it's that 30-foot line of sight. So pick a spot about 30 feet down on the ground. That's where you pin your neck position to. So keep the head neutral. And then we always say let your hips fall downhill, because generally if we say let your chest fall downhill, people bend at the waist and they get really poor body position going down the hill. But if you think about falling forward and letting your hips fall first, you can really kind of let gravity do the work. That's kind of a big point there. It's basically downhill running is a controlled fall, a really controlled fall.
You control your speed based on how much hip forward movement you go with. That's almost like your accelerator there. The more you start getting those hips forward, the faster, the more gravity is going to do its work for you.
So the more you allow those hips to fall, the faster you're going to go. And the last point there that's really important is think about lifting your heels. So not so much worrying about pushing backwards. we're not so worried about much anything other than lifting our heel and allowing our leg to cycle through as quick as possible.
Yep.
So that's really
it's just all leg turnover really at that point in time.
Sure. Yeah. And you're basically allowing your legs to turn over as fast as you can comfortably do that without feeling like you're totally out of control.
Exactly.
I've seen some people running downhill and they look like they have lost all control over their limbs.
Is it Rachel off Friends? This is probably like old news now, but there's that one segment on Friends where, Phoebe. Was it Phoebe? One of them. Yeah, they're like running all crazy style and how good it feels to run like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, don't let yourself get totally out of control.
Yeah.
But, you want to let those legs turn over as quickly as possible.
Yeah, like I don't do a ton of running. I'm not the biggest of runners.
We just needed to fill the spot on the couch.
We did. I'm staying pretty quiet over here. But when I do run, especially on the downhills, like there's times where the longer, and you can feel it, the longer your foot's on the ground, the more you feel that knee just wanting to like dive forward on you, and your quads essentially having to do so much work to try to, and your knee essentially do so much work to try to keep your speed down. So like going slower can almost feel harder at times.
Yep.
But when thinking about just getting that foot off the ground as quick as you can and decreasing that time, that's less time that load's going through your body.
And that's a good segue into the changes you would make for ultra distance running.
Mm-hmm.
So running downhill ultra distance, I would say, again, carry over all these same points to gradual downhills. And, really a gradual downhill is 3%, 3% grade or less. And that is a downhill where you're not so worried about your body getting put into those horrible body positions as far as knee position. That's the big one is, when you're impacting the ground, your knee just juts forward every time.
Yeah.
That's where you get into major joint problems over a long, long distance. So on steeper downhills in an ultra distance event, we really want to avoid the really fun stuff, I would say. Avoid the stuff that you like want to do when you're out running trails, shorter distance, which is like jump over logs and
you're pretending like you're Ninja Warrior.
Oh yeah. You're like a kid again.
Yep.
And you're jumping down hills across creeks and everything you can find you're going to jump over or jump down or jump off of.
Yep.
If you're doing an ultra distance event, those things can come and bite you later.
That all adds up.
Those are the big impacts. Those are, we want to avoid big impacts. So avoid jumping off or down things. It's kind of a big one. So as far as running goes, we want to make sure that if we're running steeper sections, we're almost going to sink down a little bit and run with almost like a quarter squat. The big thing to note here is that we want to make sure that we're landing kind of on the midsole or the heel when you're running downhill, and the hips are back. So if you stand up and you do a proper squat, your hips shoot back first. You get that break at the waist. That's really kind of the position that you're going to be running a lot of these steeper downhills. And the main reason, which we just talked about, was to bring the hips back, bring the knees back behind the feet just a little bit, and take some load off those knees and quads. And you can't get rid of impact, right? So you can only move it around. So what we're trying to do is move around impact from the joints and muscles that are less fatigue resistant to the ones that can handle a beating. So if we run with a little bit of a quarter squat and the hips are behind the knees, then
you're just pulling more muscle groups into the load bearing. So instead of really loading up quads, now you're doing quads, glutes, even hamstrings are going to play some role there. Yeah,
so all the big muscles are going to be more involved in that impact, in soaking up the impact of running downhill.
Yep.
And that comes with staying off your toes, hitting midsole or heel as you're kind of running down those sections. Now, on the steepest sections, where
just roll, right?
You're out of control.
Just roll.
You just
barrel roll
tuck and
it.
Roll.
Just tuck and roll. Ninja roll.
I would say that's not the best idea, but to each his own. But on the steeper sections, you're basically just going to hike them, and just like going uphill. If the downhill running is uncontrollable, like you just can't really go downhill under control, especially if there's like loose terrain or lots of roots
road
and
surface
rocks
is going to play a big part of this too.
Yep. So you're gonna hike, so you're gonna slow yourself down. You're still gonna work on landing midfoot or heel as you hike down, and then you're still thinking about keeping your hips back, so keeping your hips behind your knees. So the worst thing you can do is try to take big steps down straight-legged and impact and get a lot of that compression force going through the knee joint. So try to keep a little bend, keep the hips back, hike down, and then you're dispersing the load to those big muscle groups again. The last little tip that I'll put in there is that you can always use trees and stuff like that to kind of slow your descent or control your descent a little bit more. I know that's maybe common knowledge. There's a lot that'll
use the hiking poles too, or the running poles.
Yeah, you can use the trekking poles to kind of take load, off of your legs and put it a little bit to your arms. But going downhill, it's really easy to kind of like grab onto a tree and just slow yourself down a little bit. So,
all right, I think that's all we got.
All right.
If folks have questions, you know where to find us. BuildPeakCompete.com.
Yep. And
anywhere you've been watching this,
check us out on other social media at BPC Performance.
Bam. Give us a follow. We'll chat with y'all later.
Adios.
Peace.